So like we sort of went over in the first few minutes, edge extrusion, it's pretty much you just literally grab the edges and push them out to form shapes. What I've got here with this shape I don't really like, so I'm just gonna, like, we'll be doing a lot of this border select, which grabs all the open edges, meaning any edges that aren't, you know, connected to other things, which is, you know, if I try and select those they won't pick, but open edges will. And just to, you know, sort of further accentuate that, we're going to turn on backface culling, which is in the properties menu when you right click, and then we'll see that there's actually holes there and there's no backfaces in there, so that sort of makes the open borders a little bit more obvious. I'm just going to scale this down a little bit and move it around a bit to try and get a bit more of a sort of a bit different sort of flow happening to what I had originally. I don't really like that these are sort of really, these top curves are really converging down, and these ones are sort of, I don't know, it's just because it was a subdivided box. I'm just trying to get some more, like the lines should sort of flow cleanly across the whole thing, so I'm just setting that up to give me a better starting point for when I extrude things. It'll look a bit more clean flow wise, some nice curves and things. I hope that made sense. But we're just going to grab the border here and just shift and then drag. Okay, this is we've already reached an important little point. See, there's a fin here. I want to have some divisions there for the fin, so I'm going to leave a bunch of edges right in the center of it. So these are gonna form the basis of when we need to cut this out. You need to sort of plan your mesh in your head while you're making it. I know that I'm going to need some extra geometry there, so I'm having one of the segments of these extruded loops. I'm going to keep it right there over the fin, so that it's there when we need to start building the fin. So same thing again. I'm going to extrude this down to about halfway between this fin and the next one. So I'm sort of keeping a similar sort of spacing between these loops, not totally the same. It's you don't have to fuss over it, but again, just correcting to make this a little bit more of a smooth sort of curve. Like I said, you don't have to fuss over keeping everything really even, especially with an organic model like this. Like, real things aren't perfect geometrically. I'm also, because this fin is really quite long, I'm going to give it two segments. I'm going to give it a cut here and a cut down there. So I'm going to go to the end of it. So again, I'm planning out the actual segments of this tail sort of section to line up with the fin, so that I have plenty of geometry to use once I need to do that. I'm going to drag this down to the back of that fin. So again, planning the cuts where they will be of most use when we need to do the fins and actually integrate them into the rest of the mesh. I don't want to have to start making cuts halfway along one of these segments, for example. I want there to be some geometry already there. And I'm going to move these over a little bit just so that it's the segment is more towards the middle of this thing, because I mean it's going to be thickest in the center there, so having that segment is going to help. And if this is not making total sense to you yet, it'll sort of fall into place as we make the fin if you just watch through the whole video. I'm going to keep going with this. I'm going to drag out the rest of this sort of tail section. I'm going to start rotating it because it's approaching the rear fin, and that's going to, you know, I'm going to need to start making the flow happen on more of an angle for this big final tail piece sort of thing. Before we go into the tail, I'm going to go back into our other view and see how this lines up. See, it's not doing too great at the moment. I'm going to sort of grab some of these segments in vertex mode and sort of stretch them out a little bit. The ref isn't perfectly lined up. I'm going to move that a little bit as well. Yeah, it's better. but you want to be constantly going back to the reference and checking that everything is lining up reasonably well. It doesn't have to be perfect, of course. Now I'm going to hit Alt-X with the object selected, and it will make whatever selected semi-transparent. Obviously it hasn't done it to this one up here, and that's toggleable for anything. You can set anything to semi-transparent. You won't be able to see the textures when you set things semi-transparent, which is the one downside. If I tried to do that on the reference image for whatever reason, it would become untextured and go semi-transparent rather than keep the textures. So I'm kind of happy with how that's lining up for now. So I'm going to hit Alt-X again to make it opaque. And the other thing to do is when you make any significant edits, check it in perspective. So especially with the edge faces turned on, right click here, edge faces, and you can see sort of where there's any. You want to keep in mind when you're doing organic models, you want to look for any sort of edge flows that look a little bit sort of angular. Like you can see here, this is looking like a pretty harsh angle there. I could sort of smooth that off by just sort of giving that a little shove back in that direction. Same with this here, push them back a little bit. And you know, if you look sort of along the loops, you can see here this is obviously digging in a little bit. If you keep them sort of nice and uniform curves, you'll have a much nicer shading model. Just look for any kind of like little erratic sort of bends in the curves, and try and make them a little bit more graceful and flowing. It will just shade better in the end. Speaking of shading, while we're working on it, I'm going to grab all these faces and scroll down and set them all to the same smoothing group 1, and then they're going to be smooth shaded. Turn off the edges now, and you can see, like, because we did a little bit of preparing, it's shading quite smoothly now, so that's cool. We'll have a go at this tail now, I suppose. So again, just grab the open border, and we can just start sort of by doing this and then flaring it out a bit. This there's a lot of ways you can approach this. I'm just showing you the edge extrusion one. It's not the be all and end all. But I'm gonna just go overkill on using just edge extrusion and nothing else pretty much on this one to really show the technique. And about a million different circumstances it can be used. So I'm just flaring this out as well when I to make the tail. And as you might be able to intuit while we're doing this, we're also losing the bottom half of this geometry. Okay, so it's not actually a whole piece anymore, and that's why I'm not dragging it all the way down there, because it's still got an open hole at the bottom. So what I can do is I can grab this and start dragging that down. Remember, you can drag in more than just one or two directions, and it's still perfectly valid edge extrusion. I'm going to grab these. I'm going to start pulling them in with the scale tool, so that they make like a sort of, you know, they've got like fins have this kind of airfoil sort of shape. Drag that down again. Grab this. Like I've got two vertices selected there. Collapse them. Collapse, and now that's now a solid piece. You know, it's like I've got that cross section there, and I can just start edge extruding that. So I'll scale it down a little bit, which is cool. I don't like the shape of this, and rather than, you know, having to modify it manually, I just want these to be a straight line there, pretty much. So I'm going to go with an open edge. You can hit cap, and it will just make a poly there. So I'm just going to click on that polygon and scroll down, and I'm going to go, where is it? Make planar. Okay. Now they're just a straight line. I can delete the cap and go back into the edge extrusion stuff. So I'm just going to keep dragging this. You'll get bored of just, you know, shift dragging and scaling things and pushing them around. But that's the demo that we're doing. That's the technique we're showing for this particular video or couple of videos, whatever it ends up being. Yeah, This is cool. Now to get this little cutout, we're going to have to do a little bit of sort of janking around here. Just grabbing, again, like just modify everything to suit. Just don't be afraid to manually push vertices around. As long as you keep the flow nice and clean. As you can see, we're sticking mostly to quads again, and I'm assigning that all to smoothing group 1 again. So we've got a decent little sort of airfoil shape for the fin there, which is cool. I'm kind of happy with that. Before we go into this the tip shape there, I'm going to show you how to sort of join things up kind of smoothly. We're going to grab these, and like I said, when you shift drag with edges, it's only going to actually create more geometry from the open edges. So even if I've got these ones running in this direction selected, if I drag, it's only going to take into account the open edges. So I'm going to rotate that and start sort of rotating it more as I go down there. And now we want to join all this up, and we want to keep as much of it as we can in quads rather than tris. So I can see there's already going to be one there, so I'm just lining this up a little bit more, and then we can just grab this, control click, grab the other one, then go bridge. The other way you can use bridge is without anything selected, click bridge, and then drag from one to the other, and then go click again. So yeah, now that's bridged up nicely. We're going to want to grab these, maybe rotate them a bit so that it creates a nicer sort of flow into the bottom half of the fin, which is cool. I'm going to grab those, and again, doesn't matter, these are selected. Shift drag that, rotate it. Yeah. I can see there's an opportunity to create a quad there to seal this this structure up, and again, play around with the verts just to get the flow nice and not too angular. A little bit of sort of graceful curviness to it. You know, it's never going to be totally curvy with it is simple edges, vertices kind of thing. There's only so much you can do, but you can sort of give the impression that it's a curvy sort of thing. So we've plugged up this side, but over this side there's still a hole, and the obvious way to fix this is to chuck on a symmetry modifier, and this is why it was important for us to center the pivot, because the symmetry modifier works on the pivot. If I go into symmetry and apply it, it's obviously in the wrong axis right now. It's trying to mirror, shows you with this orange arrows which way it's mirroring. If we click check the axes to get the right one, in this case it's Z. So now that side's plugged up. If you go to flip, it will mirror the opposite side to the opposite side, so now they've both got holes in them. So they're the things to keep in mind. The other one to watch out for, especially later on when we do some fine grain sort of details, is the threshold. Set this to pretty low most of the time, like 0.005 or something. And what that basically does is, along the seam down the mirror, it will start trying to weld together all vertices, and that's the threshold at which it welds them. If you've got some, like especially on the fins and stuff, if you've got some vertices that are quite close together, you can lose detail by welding them. So just set the threshold really, really low, and you'll be safe from losing anything. It can happen without you noticing it sometimes. Then we'll go collapse, and of course when we collapse, this is no longer an instance, so we'll just open up our script again, go evaluate all in tools, click on that guy, and they're instances again, so we're good to keep modeling. So we'll move on to the extremities of this tail sort of thing. We're going to do things a little bit differently, as we have to seal up these the ends of this, the fins. I'll start off on this part because it's a little bit more simple. We don't have the cut out little spike bit. So pay mind when I'm doing any scaling operations as we go, that whether I grab this angle or this inner angle, as we should hopefully know, they do different things. You're only scaling in a couple of axes rather than in all three. I find with this kind of thing it's best to model it without giving it without tapering it in the third axis, in this kind of axis along here, and sort of FFDing it at the end. It's, often ends with nicer sort of flowing scale shapes, I guess. How do I explain that? The taper is more consistent. It's less, if you do it by hand, you can sort of lose track of how much you should do it. It's not as mathematical and all that kind of stuff. So we're coming up to a point where we have to close this fin to a point. So I'm not going to grab all of them. We're going to do something sort of like what happened here. There's going to be a bit of a split, or an anti-split in this case. So I'll drag this down, drag that down. Oh, I've gotten 3 there. So I've picked 3 edges there and extruded them. I'll pick 3 there as well. So, and you'll understand why this isn't just a sec. I mean, if you're quite switched on, you'll know what's going on already. But if it's not totally making sense why we're only grabbing some of them, just sit tight and it'll make sense really soon. So I'm gonna actually bring them down to into each other to make that point. Just massage things until they sort of sit in the right spot. And you also want to generally try and line these sort of segments up so that they will connect up well as quads in the end. So I'm just going to grab these sets of edges, okay, and get rid of any other selection. And we're just going to bridge them together with the bridge tool, okay? So as long as you've got the same number of edges selected on each side, the bridge tool is going to work just fine. We'll actually mess with how this is structured a little bit. Turn that a bit more. This one too. And scale that because it's getting a bit bulgy now. That's pretty close to being okay. And we'll cap these for now, but that just means both sides get capped at the same time, and then grab these 2 edges and connect them up because we want to keep things pretty much in quads. This is something you can do if you feel like it. If you've got something like this which looks a little bit sort of, the angles are a bit wonky or whatever, you can sort of grab all these and you can correct things a little bit with this relax tool. It sort of smooths them out a little bit, which is, I don't know, it's kind of up to you whether you want to use that. Sometimes it doesn't get the best results, but I mean, I'm okay with what it's done just now. I'm just going to drag these out to make it a bit more of a sort of, the point doesn't have such huge big triangles leading into it, because then it'll shade a little bit more nicely because there's more detail, I guess, in the point. So I'll just set all these to smooth grip 1. Remember I was saying I didn't want to taper it in while I was actually modeling it. This is I'll do that now. I'll just grab all these and then I'll apply without going back into the node or staying in the sub-object mode. I'll just put in a FFD, let's just say 2x2x2 control points in the modifier, and I'll just scale this down like that, I guess. Probably going to want to do the whole tail a little bit more as well, collapse all that, and then grab pretty much the whole tail. What do we got there? And then 2x2x2 I guess, and I'll just grab the back of that, scale it in a little bit, just to sort of give it a bit more taper. I'll grab the bottom one as well, just pull that in. I'm pretty okay with that. And obviously now we've just applied a modifier, so this won't be an instance. See, it doesn't have the FFD applied down there. It's still chunky, but we'll just finish off the point of the tail first, and then we'll go back and rebuild the instance, because we don't need to monitor the width of it yet in this part. Again, we're going to grab partial whips for this thing. I believe that would be the nicest way to do it. I'm going to rotate this a little bit first. Okay, so you can see I'm sort of building this spike shape here. It's a little bit messy at this point. I want to scale this down a bit. Then we can drag this out further again, sort of get that sweeping sort of hook at the end. See, now as you go, you'll often see this isn't flowing too well. I want that to sort of be a bit more rounded. It's like I've said before already, it's you got to keep everything sort of flowing nicely, and that will keep the shading pretty good. So just continuing the same old routine, I guess, for this part. I can see that's going to need to be adjusted to keep the right sort of shapes happening. I'm going to start pulling these out as well. Go into my perspective view. Oops. Isolate that. I want to zoom in here and pick these two, because they're really close together. But I mean, you could use target world for this as well, but I'm just collapsing for the moment. And you don't want to pick both of those and collapse, otherwise they'll do that, and you don't want that. That's if you try and weld those together, you'll get horrible shading. And besides, there's still tail meat there, fin meat, that we need to have. I'm going to grab all of these and scale them in a bit. I did say I wasn't going to try and do any of this by hand, but we kind of need to fudge this together a little bit so it doesn't stay too chunky while we're making it. Just going to give that a little bit of a point there. Turn it a bit. And rotate and scale that. So can you see that we're kind of trying to keep the actual curve fairly, we don't want it to be too, we don't want the width of the curve to change too much within one segment sort of thing. I'm going to bridge those two. Oops. Just go to full screen so you can see what I'm doing better. And I'll bridge the other side as well, just for now. Set it all to smooth group 1, I guess, just so that we can keep an eye on how it's all shading. And again, just sort of continue as normal, I guess. This is going to be a tricky one to solve. I'm going to try and get this up here. I did a run through of this shoot, and I can't remember exactly how I solved this shape last time, but this is going to be close enough, I think. Just drag this whole thing up like that. Again, we've got these little guys hanging out, sort of very close but not actually connected. So I'll show you target weld now. Click, 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 right. That's kind of, they're connected now, so that's all good. Alright, cool. We can just continue that. Same deal. Scale it down. You might be able to notice already that the resolution that we've got here, it's a little bit, we've got kind of too many edges compared to other places. It's a little bit inconsistent res wise. At the end of all the modeling, I'm going to do a little optional video for if you want to optimize it. You don't want to be optimizing meshes if they are for sculpting. You don't want to start collapsing everything down and sort of creating tries and stuff, because that's largely what you do when you optimize. So we're going to do the whole thing just using quads and not really thinking about optimization, and then we'll go in and have another video just for the optimization part and making it a little bit more game ready. And I can see when I extract this, when I extrude this out, sorry, I'll turn off the wireframe just real quick. You can see that this is shading very differently to the rest, and what this should tell you straight away in your head is that, zooming in on the wrong areas, is that the mesh isn't, it's got a non-consistent curve. Like you can see it here, it sort of juts in there. That's why it's shading like that, and we want to fix those things before they get too out of hand. So we've got both sides of that. Now we'll convert that to vertices and just scale it out a bit so it's smooth. I'll grab these and that one and its opposite partner, scale them in a little bit just to keep the silhouette of that the cross section still pretty smooth. Okay, so that's fairly fixed, I think. It's not shading dodgy anymore. I just realized I accidentally scaled it. Watch out for that kind of thing. Sometimes you can just do a little misclick and it scales or moves or whatever. So just always check it's still lined up with your reference images and stuff. We're going to do pretty much the same thing we did down here. I'm just going to grab half of this set of edges. So we've got 3 there. Technically we've got 6 because we've got 2 sides selected, but we'll call it 3 because that's what we're looking at right now, and it makes a little bit more sense to think of it that way. We're treating it almost like a 2D project from this angle, right? Just scale that up a little bit. So rotate that boy, scale it up that way a bit. And then I'm going to move these so I can see obvious sort of paths between these sets of edges and bridge them. So that's cool. I have a feeling this is going to be a bit more of an interesting one to close up, because the way it's going, we're going to end up with an n-gon, but I'll show you how to avoid that. Again, if you're making something straight up for a game model and not for sculpting or subdividing or whatever, you can use n-gons if you want to. Or an n-gon is something with more than 4 sides, a shape with more than 4 sides. So like these all have 4 sides. We haven't used any triangles yet, but they'll come up later. An n-gon, you want to try and avoid them if you want to subdivide the thing and sculpt it and stuff. So we're just scaling this down as we go. So as you can see, once we connect that up, it's going to end up with a 5-sided thing there. I'll show you one way you can fix it real quick. So there's tons of ways that you could do interesting little topology tricks in here to solve this, to reconcile this cap without creating an n-gon or a tri. But those would all result in interesting shading and probably too complex geometry in that little tiny part. So what we're going to do is just we're just going to pick that edge, loop select it, go to chamfer here, and you'll find you often have to do this, especially if you're not planning everything perfectly in your head. Damn, why is that so high? So that's 0.1. So we're in chamfer tool here. We're just going to bring it down to like maybe that, and then we can just connect these up the normal way, the good old-fashioned way. We use Target World for that. So that's pretty much fine, but obviously we've got some strange angles happening in there, and we might want to just sort of make them flow a little bit more nicely. Again, we might want to flare this out a little bit. Now that we've got the geometry there, we might as well use it for something. I'm pretty okay with that, and because that was a little bit of messing around, I'm not going to do the same on the other side. I'll just use the symmetry modifier, select everything and put it on smoothing group 1, and now we've got like a pointed tail. Again, the actual density of geometry here is a lot higher than it needs to be, but we're doing that to keep it all in quads. And we will go and pass over that and clean it up for, you know, game ready use later. Again, I'm just showing you something that you do to sculpt first. So again, we're just symmetry modifying this and getting both sides of that tail capped up. I'm going to turn the threshold way down just in case because like I said, it's gotten a lot higher density in here. So this threshold might actually start picking up things we don't want it to there. So just set it really low. And then you'll only get welds like pretty much right along the seam. So that tail is good to go. Now we've got a script to re-instance these two boys together. You can see that's still got the FFD mod on the stack. So we'll go into our Mac script editor. So remember, get the one we want to copy to the other selected, evaluate all, and then click on the other one. So now they're both got their tail finished, which is cool. What are we going to do next? We will start with the head, I suppose, rather than going straight into the other fins. We'll do something a little bit different. We'll grab all of these, I guess, and start pulling them down. So this is back to sort of basics again, now that we've done a little bit of slightly more complex stuff. I won't say crazy complex. Where's our geometry going exactly? I want to keep some of these a little bit lined up, not completely perfectly, but just a little bit lined up with the gills in case we want to cut those in later. Which probably I won't bother doing while keeping this all in quads, because if you were going to sculpt this, you would probably just use your sculpting program to cut those in. At the end, while we're doing the optimization, I'll show you how to just cut them in without any regards to keeping it in quad topology. We're still good. So now we need to be able to sort of lead this into the hammerhead part, the hammer of the hammerhead, you know what I mean? So we need to start preparing for that. We need to think about how we're going to actually flow this into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the edges. Oh, actually I'll do one more go until we're right at the base of the actual hammer part. Again, pay mind that I'm only scaling things down in 2 axes, and then we'll FFD everything as we go, I guess. And always checking for decent, smooth flowing edge loops. Okay, now we'll start splitting it up. We'll consider this half to be the top of the head. So I'm just scaling this down because we also know that the head's going to get more flat. So I start doing preparation for that. And this half, this one is a little bit more complicated because I've got to actually put the mouth there as well. So I'm going to grab just these two because I can see that's where the mouth sort of stops. Scale it down a bunch. Start sort of, I want to try and do a bunch of this before I go down to the bottom half of the head. Again, this is totally fine for us to just scale this way down because the effect that it's having is it's also flattening the head out as it goes. But now it's starting to look a little bit silly from the top view. So as you can see there, we're going to go into our other view. Even here the gills should be probably pushed out a little bit more. What we'll do is we'll grab everything up to there, go to our FFD, we'll go 3x3 this time, or 3x3x3 technically, but we're working in 2 dimensions at the moment, so that's okay. We'll flare this out a little bit, and we'll turn on the semi-transparent view. We want to drag these in. I know you can't really see what's going on there, but the good thing is it's totally undoable if you don't want to, if you do something you didn't mean to. So that's about the right shape for me. It's tapering down to the sort of skull of this guy. The other thing to pay mind to is that this should be getting more parabolic sort of as we go towards the front, because it's getting like a curvy shape. So we want to start preparing our edge loops to sort of take on that shape. So what I'm going to do is, okay, I can see This is going to look a bit tricky, but in our top view, we can see the side of that. I'm only picking it in the top view because we haven't re-instanced them yet. So I'm just going to grab those and unhide all again. Then we can go down to the FFD 3x3x3. Okay, so we've just got the top half selected again. I'll clarify just in case it's confusing. This is just like if I was to turn this off X-ray mode, it's just this top half of the head here. So down here you can see it again. It's just the top of the dome, the guy's skull, I guess. So I'm going to grab this middle point and start dragging it out. And pull these ones back in a little bit. And so you can see that this is going to mathematically figure out a good way to start curving that topology without us having to do any of that by hand. It can just figure it out for us. I'm going to collapse that and finally put it back to an instance. Where's our script? Now remember, this is the one we've edited and this is the one we want to instance it to. So I've got this one selected. We probably don't want to be in sub-object mode. Evaluate all, click on that one, and now we've got that nice curvature of the skull, I guess. Pick all this again, smoothing group 1, and we'll continue sort of blocking out the head of this guy. So this next part I've sped up to 200% just so that you don't have to sit there watching it as it's happening slowly, because it's quite repetitive. It's just extruding a whole bunch of edges and scaling them and rotating them pretty much to suit, and I'm just sort of going around the contour of the front of the shark's head. The only thing to pay mind to here is how many segments you actually use. It's up to you, but as long as there's sort of room for them to connect the bottom half to the top half, and that's sort of what I'm looking at right now when I move these edge loops around a bit and make sure that it's sort of a little bit mirror image, not perfect, but it has to be kind of same segment count. So we've just gotten through a little repetitive part, and now we're at sort of a piece that needs to be thought about a little bit. So we know that the head of this guy sort of is just a round, like basically just big battering ram sort of thing, but we also know that the jaw has to be, I mean, a shark's mouth isn't just a straight line like this, so we do have to get it curving again so that it can flow nicely into this into the actual upper row of teeth. So what we're going to do is pretty similar to what we did on the top here. We'll just grab well, we've got the vertices right now, but we'll convert that to the polys and then grow it by 1, I guess, and then we'll get the FFD 3x3x3, and we need to start sort of getting this sort of thing happening where we just basically do the same thing again, but give a bit of a curve so that we have something to become the shark's mouth and the curve of his mouth specifically. I'm kind of okay with that, and I'm going to bring it in a little bit as well. I'm going to go just because I feel like it's going to need to flow into this part as well. So I've just brought it in a tiny bit. We'll see how that goes. That looks about the right sort of shape for the front of a shark's nose to me. You can sort of eyeball it. It doesn't really have to be perfect because, you know, living creatures are different in proportion. But you can see now that after I've modified it, it's going well past where the concept says the front of its muzzle is. So I'll just drag that back to where it was. That's kind of cool. I'm okay with that. And we're gonna drag that down. Rather than drag, I should just keep saying extrude. We're specifically extruding. We're not just dragging things. So shift drag. Gonna rotate this a little bit more, but I'm also gonna curl it a bit as it becomes the mouth. You know what I mean? So now what we have to do is we can see I've dragged this down to segments because I know we need 2 segments to join up to here. Okay, so what I'm going to do there is I'm actually going to use the bridge tool just to get these together, and I get the feeling I'm going to need another little bit of geometry there, so I'm going to connect those. If you don't know already, I'll just show that again. we already know connect can pick two vertices and connect them with an edge. You can also do it with a ring of edges. If I hit connect, it's just drawn a little edge right through the middle of them. And again, look at it from as many angles as you can and sort of get this curve happening where it all sort of flows in together nicely. The mouth needs to bulge a little bit, so that's kind of cool. And we'll just double check it from other angles. I'm just going to hide the background. So see, again, this is you look at it from this angle and you'll start seeing that there's places that you can improve the curve of it, the sort of flow. That's kind of cool. I'm going to drag this one out a bit more. So yeah, now as you can see, we've got a big open edge right where the head lobe, or whatever the hell you call that hammer part, there's plenty of room for that to go in there. So I think these are, yeah, we've FFD'd, so they're not instances, so we'll just use our script again. Evaluate, click it down there, and we'll start doing the extrusion in this view. Okay, so we're turning X-ray off, I guess, just for the... Oh, and we'll notice that this isn't totally adhering perfectly to our reference image that is short for, of course. We'll see how this goes if I might just grab this whole thing and chuck an FFD on it. FFDs solve most things, and they do it very sort of mathematically, which is cool. It's very consistent, and there's no human error in it really. So now we've got this sort of ready to go. Still not totally happy with that. I'll just pull this up a little bit. As you can see on the concept, the head is kind of lumpy, so having perfect curves is always going to wind you up it with inconsistencies like this. But so we've got the open edge selected there. We'll just pull it down, scale it, probably scale it a little bit in all dimensions, just make sure it's lining up okay. And X-ray on, we can see that's that should be a bit more of a cavity there, so we're going to pull these in. And again, always keep the curve of things sort of, doesn't have to be perfect, of course, because this part is quite lumpy and inconsistent. You know, you got these big bumps here, but try and keep it fairly flowy. I'm also going to start bringing these bits out to be a little bit less like all in a straight line sort of thing. That's looking okay to me. I'm sure some people will get quite obsessive over making sure these are nice and curved and, you know, organic looking and stuff, but for the sake of not bogging down the tutorial, I'm not going to go too crazy with it. Feel free to tweak all these kind of things to your taste. Again, pick the open edge, drag that guy down. I might actually rotate this one a little bit, and it's looking okay to me. Oop, forgot to shift drag. Remember to shift drag, everyone. Scale that a bit more. Scale only in these dimensions now. Again, just if you feel like you need more geometry in this area, go ahead and make it. There's no reason you can't drag more segments out. Pull these in. And sort of the other thing is, as you approach like a sort of curve on the end of something, you want to maybe add a bit more geometry. Like, we don't need that much here because this is all kind of quite well, the shapes are all quite simple. There's not much change in them, but here it's like a very tight curve, so we're going to need extra segments along here. Always keep that kind of thing in mind, and sort of space these out a little bit, I guess. You'll often end with segments that aren't spaced very well, but you can fix those manually, and they don't, again, like pretty much everything we're doing here, it doesn't have to be perfect. It helps if it doesn't look obviously broken, fix it up. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to turn off the edged view. So obviously it's flat shaded, but that was pretty easy to knock out that shape. We'll just set it all onto a smoothing group 1. Again, to unassign a smoothing group, you just click it and unclick it. So that's cool. A note on that, by the way, we don't want to. This has probably been covered in other videos, but we don't want to assign things to multiple smoothing groups like that. I mean, we could assign it to heaps of them, but try and keep things on one smoothing group. Otherwise, you can get sort of unpredictable results. So it's a lot more controlled if you only use one smoothing group for now. So that's cool. I'm just going to chuck on a symmetry modifier. Oh, that's right. It doesn't show up on the 720 screen. Symmetry. Obviously, this is a problem we're running into now because we're using a different orientation. It's symmetrying in the wrong axes, so we'll pick the right one. That's the right one. That's the one we want. Again, turn this number way down and collapse. And of course, because we've applied a modifier, we need to re-instance it. Evaluate, and we're back to 2 instances that we can model from, and the head is largely done, and we'll just cap this up right now. So capping up cylindrical holes and maintaining everything in quads can be a little bit difficult. I'll try and keep it pretty simple. What we're going to need to do for starters is we can see that this all these sort of line up. I'll show you. We've got sort of top and bottom to these, and they sort of all go along together, and they're obviously, we can bridge them together and form quads, but once we get here, it joins up, and that's going to have to be a triangle. So what we'll do is we'll just add in another loop by picking here and going ring. I think we'll put in another loop straight through here. You could put one up here as well, or anywhere else really, but we'll put one here because then we have a little bit more geometry for the corner of the mouth. So we're going to connect that, and I might go into just temporarily turn on the normal constraint and push them up a little bit just to give it a bit of curvature, turn it back off, and then go in and sort of refine it. We want to keep the curve of the mouth sort of consistent as usual. We want to keep everything sort of curving consistently. I'm just going to, like I said a few times already, everything should be sort of defining a curve. We don't want any coplanar faces if we can avoid it. So now that we know we've got matching edges on both sides, or the top and the bottom of this open edge here, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and, like, remember not to pick here, but we're picking each opposing face, and then we're going to bridge them up. So it's going to end up a little bit strange looking, but we'll hit bridge on that. Again, we've got the sides here are not selected because they're just going to be, there's going to be faces running along them. So you'll see in a second. That's all bridged up relatively nicely. And just because right now it's like a flat surface, rather than just leave it like that, I might just bevel it a little bit, which can result in some wacky things, but I'll show you how to fix that too. We want to go into the parameters and drag this down. We want this to be changed as well. This changes how far inset it is. What way are we going? No, we'll go to 0.1. Sometimes you have to sort of manually edit that. That looks about right to me. We just want it to have a bit of curvature to it. And then I'm going to go down here and find relax, and relax it a little bit. Probably just one go on the relax, and then I might go into here and scale it down a tiny bit. It's not perfect, but what we can do is with those faces selected, right, we'll chuck an FFD on that, 3x3x3, and we'll grab the central points, and we'll just push them out a little bit, so it has a bit of a curvature to it instead of just instead of being sort of concave, right? Push this one out a little bit too. So now we'll collapse that down, assign everything back to smoothing group 1, of course, and now we've got a capped end on that on the side of his head where his eye is and stuff. Next we should probably figure out what's going on with the mouth here and seal that all up. So we'll go back into the side view and we will turn on our reference images. And I'm going to keep this really simple and grab the bottom where the jaw is going to be and sort of start extruding it, rotating it as well to sort of give a, to give it a curve as we go along. I'm going to end it like this. And now you might be able to infer already that that this it's not going to have the right kind of curve that we need. These verts along here are all going to be in a straight line, and I'll show you what I mean here. See, there it's actually giving him like a weird sort of underbite. So we'll grab all those and we'll just FFD those as well. I guess 2 by 2. Well, we'll go 3 by 3 just for the sake of it. Into the control points and scale down these ones at the front, and you can see the curve changing over here. So scale those down quite a bit, scale these middle ones a little bit, and then we'll grab this the point at the front and sort of extend it up a bit as well, which is kind of cool. I think we would ideally have a little bit more resolution on the jaw there, but we'll bear with it for the moment. Scale it down a little bit more there in the middle, and I think I'll collapse that because I'm sort of okay with it now. We'll just grab all those again and set them to smoothing group 1. So we've got an empty hole for the shark's mouth now, which we will patch up. So the inside of the mouth is probably going to be a little bit fiddly, as any sort of internal shape is always going to be in 3D. We'll start by doing the bottom half of the jaw, and we're going to do that by grabbing all these faces. We don't actually have to unselect these bottom ones, but just for the sake of clarity, I'm only picking the open faces on the bottom jaw. Okay, I'm going to drag this one up a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is go back into my perspective view, get the normal constraint on, push down a little bit so it pops in a little bit, and then turn the normal constraint straight back off. Otherwise it can be a little bit confusing if you forget you've left it on. I'm going to manually tweak some of these shapes here because this curve isn't really a very consistent thing happening here. I'm going to grab I think it's these ones. Yep, I'm going to scale them in just to kind of bring this curve a little bit more streamlined sort of looking. Pull this out a bit more, and I'll probably scale it in again. This is something that you'll end up doing a lot in 3D, just making edits from all kinds of different angles. When you look at something from one angle it looks kind of fine, and then it will just look silly from another. Yeah. I'm going to turn on X-ray real quick with Alt X, and I'm going to move this in a little bit because I know that it has to connect up to the top one, to the top of the jaw, and I don't want it to be too much of an extreme angle back there, which you'll probably be able to make sense of in a second when we go back and do that. So I'll grab the before I grab the top jaw, I'm actually going to turn on the symmetry modifier, because remember we put in another edge loop down here, and it hasn't actually been copied over to this side yet, because the cap on the arm where the eye is hasn't even actually been copied over yet. So symmetry right down the bottom there. What axis is that on? Just fiddle with these buttons until you find the right one, basically. Again, turn the threshold way down so it doesn't pick anything you don't want it to. So that's kind of cool. Then I'm gonna grab the top lip and then hit the loop select, and it'll just pick the whole thing because it hits here and it can't keep going because there's no coherent loop there. Okay, what I'm gonna do with this one is in the top view, I'll just unhide everything else. Hide everything else. I'm going to scale this in a little bit and move it down. I'll go just to the bottom view so you can actually see what's going on. You see it's created this ring that's sort of inset a little bit from the top of the mouth, and then we will connect it up on the inside. I guess put the camera inside here, and I guess we probably want to turn on back face view really quick. Object properties, turn off back face cull, and we'll be able to see all this. So we want to go into our target world, grab this corner and move it to the corner of the bottom of the mouth as well. again, the angles here are a little bit sort of shonky, so I'm just gonna basically tweak it around so that it's not too, there's not too much extreme change on of angles between bits of the mesh. And the other thing I'm just doing here is just making sure there's a little bit of separation between the top and the bottom of the mouth. Again, you can see sort of why I moved this forward, because if it was back here, it would be like a weird little corner. I'll move this down a little bit as well, so it's not so extreme. So I'm kind of cool with that one so far. Yeah, so we'll set it all to smoothing group 1. The smoothing's not going to be great, but that's okay. If we were doing a low poly only, we would set up smoothing groups differently, so it's shaded nice. But seeing as we're sort of setting this up with a mind for sculpting it later, it's this is all okay, and then we'll go and do an optimization pass to show how we do it for a low poly. We'll put on a symmetry modifier again. I think it was in Z-axis. Yep. And now you can see the corner of the mouth is joined up there. Again, turn this way down and collapse it. So we've kind of got the shark's lips, if you can call them that, done. And we just need to follow them through to the inside of the mouth. So the inside of the mouth is going to be a little bit tricky. To make things easier, I'm going to select all the polys around the mouth, right, including the inside. So just have a double check that these sort of inside parts are all selected. I'm going to go down here to detach. These shouldn't be ticked, because then we've got it as a separate object, and you can see it hasn't made a copy underneath. So now we can hide everything. So we're just looking at this part and nothing's particularly confusing or in the way. We're going to do this the easy way, assuming there's no detail inside the mouth. Just pick the open border and just stretch this out like this. We might go into the normal constraint again and push it down a little bit. Turn it back off immediately, of course. So we'll start by stitching these little bits together here. So we've got two sort of rows of quads, and just grab the corresponding ones and collapse. I would recommend you find a keyboard shortcut to collapse pretty soon, because you do use it a lot. But now we've got this sort of, obviously the top row of the mouth doesn't have the same number of segments as the bottom, and this could be a problem, but because this mesh is inside the mouth, we don't have to make it perfect flowing sort of thing. We're just going to grab these two now and go bridge. Now we're going to grab this one and bridge it to this one over here that we've just created, and then we're left with two there and two there. So you can solve most of these sort of gaps with quads only, which you should try to do if you can. I'm going to grab these three as well, and I'm just going to go down to relax to sort of mitigate the strangeness of that structure there. So yeah, that's perfectly valid topology, and it will, you know, it might look a little bit weird, but it's inside the mouth, so it's not a big deal. I'm just going to push these out a little bit as well to keep this sort of curve look going. Pull that one in a bit maybe. Anyway, I'll turn the symmetry on this, in the Z axis, and collapse it, set it all to smoothing group 1. So now we've got an inside of a mouth and there's no open edges. That's kind of the important thing we're going for, I guess. Well, it's not hugely important, but you usually don't want to have open edges when you're sculpting something, because if you have gaps in the mesh, it can get little ray misses and things like that if you're baking it. So now we're just going to pick the main body mesh, attach here, and click that mouth mesh. And then of course we've attached it in, but now everything's unwelded, so if I was to click away from it, you'd see a seam there. So we'll just grab all these. It doesn't matter if you're imprecise. Go down here to weld, but make sure you go to the settings button and set it quite low. Obviously not so low that it doesn't do anything. 0.1 seems to be working there, so I'm going to go with that. Nothing's been welded that we didn't want to weld, and the mouth is now reintegrated with the rest of the mesh. So now all we have to do is the fins. The body is done. I'll put the fins in another video, I suppose, because I'm going to do something a little bit interesting with them. Anyway, that's the body done.